Raman, your Alberta real estate tutor. Today we'll talk about how to pass your Alberta real estate exam. Once you have enrolled for the course itself, the next step is to go through and pass the exam. So let's take a look at what are the different things that you need to keep in mind in order to pass your exam on first try. Let's take a look at how to prepare for and pass the Alberta real estate exam. Tip number 1. First thing you want to do is to get into the right mindset. Many people who go through this exam or prepare for Alberta real estate exam have not studied or gone to school in a long time. So when you haven't done something in a period of time, you kind of get rusty in that. So make sure if you are getting frustrated or if you find yourself getting frustrated or not quite getting the concepts, you're reading the paragraphs again and again, but it's not sinking in. Don't get frustrated. Just take a step back and create a positive mindset. So think about why you want to get into this profession, what you need to do. So make sure you work on that mindset and approach preparing for this exam in a positive way. So think of all the positives. Take a deep breath and just focus on what you need to do and why you're doing it. That way, when you hit those hard times where things are not really sinking in, you'll have an easier way to get through them. And if you find yourself just hitting your head against something, just take a break and then walk away from it and come back maybe at a different time to tackle that problem. Second thing is break it into small chunks. Now, you may have seen the manuals, they're quite big. So this exam requires a fair bit of studying. There are a lot of concepts you have to go through. So make sure you don't leave it to the last minute. Instead, you break the entire manual, everything you have to study, into smaller parts. So spend maybe an hour a day or a couple hours a day studying instead of leaving everything to the last minute. I've had students come to me where they have had 18 months to study for this exam, which is what you get, but they have left it to the last minute. Now they have only 2 months left and they need to complete this whole thing, or otherwise they have to pay for the entire course once again. So don't do that. It's best if you take the whole thing and just break it into smaller parts and set the study time and make sure you get into that discipline of setting aside time to study every day instead of leaving it till the last minute, because it gets really difficult if you have tons of stuff left at the end and you are running out of time to prepare for the exam. Tip number 3 is to understand the exam format. Now, I've done a different episode on this, so you can go check that out. But just to briefly go over this, the exam has 100 multiple choice questions, so there is no need to really memorize stuff because they're all multiple choice questions, so it becomes easier to answer them, and you'll need 70% to pass the exam. So when you're studying, keep that in mind. Next one is understand the marks distribution. The different units in the manual will have different marks allocated to them. Therefore, we don't need to spend the equal amount of time on each unit. I highly recommend before you dive into the studying, you actually take time to look at what is the mark distribution for each unit. You'll need to spend more time on units that have higher marks allocated to them. And the ones that have smaller mark distribution, you can spend less time on. So the focus needs to be on the units, on the bigger units with higher mark distribution. Tip number 5 is to understand the concept. In this case, we don't really need to memorize a ton of stuff. And I highly recommend not to memorize stuff because it's more important to understand the concepts themselves, because there will be questions asked that will be based on scenarios and logical questions where you won't be able to find the answer in the book. So it's best to understand the overall concept than to really memorize stuff. And really, it's important that you don't memorize the quizzes either. Every unit will have a quiz attached to it. It's important to go through the quiz, but please don't memorize it because the questions on the exam will not be exactly the way questions on the quiz are. So it's important that you understand the overall concept rather than just memorizing the quizzes. Tip number 6 is to make sure you go through all the examples. In the manual, you'll find tons of different examples. They're usually in the boxes, so they'll be easy to find in the manual. So make sure you go through all these examples, because on the exam, you won't just get straightforward questions like they ask on the quizzes. Instead, you will also find what's called situational or scenario questions. So they will give you a scenario, and based on that, they will ask you a question. The best way to prepare for these type of questions is to go through the examples that they have given in the book. So usually the scenario questions will be very similar to the examples. So make sure you go through all the examples and really understand them so that you're able to answer these scenario questions. Also very important to understand the key terms. So there are a number of terms in the book that you need to understand. For example, what is real estate? What is the meaning of land? Real property, chattels, these type of terms. You really need to understand those, because there will be direct questions based on definitions of these terms. So the best thing to do is to go through the glossary and make sure you have the definitions or understand the definitions of each term. Tip number 8 is to make sure you find a study partner if possible. It is so much easier to study with a partner because you usually will have scheduled time and you'll have that additional accountability to somebody. When we try to do something on our own, we may start doing it with great enthusiasm, and then partway down the road, we lose interest in that. If you have a study partner, you can keep each other accountable and you can keep each other on track to finishing your manual. Last tip is to make sure you're excited. There's a reason you are choosing to go into real estate. So think about why you want to be a real estate agent and all the reasons that you have. Think about those when you find yourself getting bogged down by things. So be excited. This is a fun career to be in, and you'll find great benefits from being a real estate agent. So just to recap, first, make sure you have the right mindset. It's very important to stay in that positive mindset while you're preparing for this exam. Second one, make sure you break the entire studies into smaller chunks so you allocate 1 to 2 hours every day instead of leaving everything to the end. Third one is to understand the exam format. Because there are no essay type questions, it's really not important to memorize a ton of stuff. Fourth one is to understand the marks distribution. The units that have heavier mark allocation need to have greater focus from you. Most importantly, understand the concepts. You don't need to memorize a ton of stuff, but it's very important to understand the concepts, because then you'll be able to answer those questions logically. Make sure you go through all the examples, because you will see scenario questions on the exam that will be based on the examples in the book. Very important to understand the key terms, because you will find questions on the exam that are pure definitions. Find a study partner. It's much easier to do this with someone than doing it all by yourself. And most importantly, be excited. This is an exciting career, so make sure you stay in that excitement. If you would like to download the checklist for these tips, you can see the link in the description and click the link to download these tips. And if you need any extra help with the exam preparation, please feel free to visit www.albertarealestateschool.com, or you can call me at 587-936-7779.